Have you ever felt like your paycheck isn't stretching as far, while at the same time, news headlines are warning of an economic slowdown? This isn't just a feeling, it's a real economic puzzle that has stumped leaders for decades. It's called stagflation, and it's the worst of both worlds. Welcome to the Economy Unpacked daily YouTube channel. From Wall Street to your street, we share the world of money in a clear way. Today, we're diving into one of the most feared and misunderstood economic phenomena, stagflation. It's a rare and puzzling situation where an economy experiences low or stagnant growth, high inflation, and often high unemployment, all at the same time. This goes against everything traditional economics teaches us. Normally, inflation rises when economies grow too fast and falls when they slow down. Stagflation breaks this rule, making it an economic paradox that captures intense attention from economists, investors, and governments alike. Why does this strange mix of problems matter so much? Because it creates one of the most difficult challenges for policymakers to solve, with consequences that ripple through every part of our lives. To understand why stagflation is so disruptive, we need to look at how economies are supposed to work. In classical economics, there's a well-known trade-off between inflation and unemployment, famously illustrated by the Phillips curve. The theory is simple. When an economy is booming and growth is strong, demand for goods and services rises. Businesses hire more people to keep up, unemployment drops, and with everyone spending, prices tend to increase, leading to inflation. On the flip side, when the economy weakens and growth is slow, demand falls. This usually leads to higher unemployment, but also causes inflation to ease, as businesses cut prices to attract customers. Stagflation shatters this predictable pattern. It creates a nightmare scenario where prices continue to rise sharply, even though the economy is weak and unemployment is high. This leaves households and businesses squeezed from both sides. Families find their purchasing power eroded by rising prices, while their job security is threatened by a slowing economy. For policymakers, it's a trap with no easy escape, setting the stage for the widespread disruption we'll explore. The most infamous real-world example of stagflation took place in the 1970s, an era defined by an unprecedented oil crisis. In 1973, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, imposed an oil embargo, drastically restricting supplies to Western nations. This caused the price of oil to skyrocket, sending a shockwave through the global economy. Since oil is a critical input for everything from transportation to manufacturing, production costs soared across the board. At the same time, Western economies were already facing internal issues, including slowing growth and rising unemployment after a long post-war boom. The surge in oil prices acted as a massive brake on these already sluggish economies. Governments were caught in a bind. They tried to respond, but many of their policies inadvertently made the problem worse. For example, some central banks engaged in excessive money printing in an attempt to stimulate growth and fight unemployment. Instead of fixing the problem, this infusion of cash into a supply-constrained economy only fueled even higher inflation, locking in the toxic mix of stagnation and price hikes. The key lesson from the 1970s was clear: external shocks, when combined with domestic policy mistakes, can create a perfect storm that destabilizes entire economies for years. So, what are the underlying causes of this economic monster? Stagflation is typically triggered by a combination of factors, starting with severe supply-side shocks. These are sudden, unexpected events that increase the cost of essential raw materials. Think of a massive jump in the price of energy, food, or key industrial metals. These shocks disrupt the very foundation of an economy's production capacity. When businesses are suddenly forced to pay more for their inputs, they face rising production costs. To protect their profit margins, they often pass these higher costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. At the same time, facing uncertainty and squeezed profits, these same businesses might cut back on hiring, lay off workers, or postpone expansion plans. This dual action, raising prices while reducing economic activities, the core mechanism of stagflation. Policy missteps can pour fuel on the fire. Imagine a scenario where a government tries to stimulate demand by cutting taxes or increasing spending right when the economy's supply side is constrained. Similarly, if a central bank pumps money into the financial system through easy money policies, it can encourage more spending. But if the economy can't produce more goods and services to meet that demand, the extra money just chases the same amount of goods, causing prices to spike without generating any real sustainable growth. Modern parallels, like the energy shocks from geopolitical conflicts or the global supply chain bottlenecks we saw post-pandemic, showed just how relevant these triggers remain today. The impacts of stagflation on society are profound and painful. For households, it's a direct hit on their standard of living. As the cost of essentials like food, housing, and energy rises faster than wages, families see their purchasing power rapidly erode. Every trip to the grocery store or gas station becomes a source of financial stress, and saving for the future becomes nearly impossible. It's a period where people feel poorer even if their income stays the same. Businesses are caught in a classic profit squeeze. They face higher costs for raw materials and labor. But weaker consumer demand means they can't always raise prices enough to compensate. Many are forced to make tough decisions, like cutting jobs, freezing wages, or delaying critical investments in new technology and equipment. This creates a vicious cycle of economic decline. For investors, stagflation is a time of high volatility and uncertainty. Traditional assets like stocks and bonds often perform poorly. Stocks suffer because corporate profits are squeezed and bonds lose value as high inflation erodes their fixed returns. In these times, investors often flee to safe haven assets like gold and other commodities, which tend to hold their value better during inflationary periods. Meanwhile, governments face an almost impossible dilemma. If they raise interest rates to fight inflation, they risk worsening the recession and increasing unemployment. But if they use spending to stimulate growth, they risk fueling even more inflation. This creates immense political and social pressure, as there are no easy answers. Given these devastating effects, how can policymakers fight back? The truth is, there are no easy solutions, and every choice involves a painful trade-off. The primary tool used to combat inflation is monetary policy. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the United States, can raise interest rates. Higher rates make borrowing more expensive for consumers and businesses, which cools down demand and, in theory, brings inflation under control. However, this is a blunt instrument. By slowing the economy, raising interest rates can deepen the slowdown, leading to higher unemployment and a full-blown recession. It's often described as taking a bitter medicine to cure a disease. On the other side is fiscal policy, which is controlled by the government. To ease the pain on households, governments might provide targeted support, such as subsidies for energy or food, or tax relief for low-income families. While these measures can provide short-term relief, they come with risks. If not carefully designed, they can increase government debt and potentially worsen inflation by injecting more money into the economy without increasing its productive capacity. The most effective long-term solution lies in structural reforms. These are policies aimed at making the economy more efficient, productive, and resilient. This could include investing in new technologies, improving education and job training, promoting competition, and diversifying energy sources and supply chains. By boosting the economy's ability to produce goods and services, these reforms can help reduce long-term stagflation risks by making the economy less vulnerable to supply shocks. Ultimately, navigating stagflation requires a delicate and coordinated dance between monetary, fiscal, and structural policies, with leaders fully aware that every decision has significant consequences. This brings us to the pressing question: are we seeing the risks of stagflation in our modern economy? The debate is intense. In recent years, several warning signs have emerged. We've witnessed dramatic increases in energy prices, partly due to the Russia-Ukraine war and OPEC's supply controls. We've also experienced severe global supply chain disruptions in the wake of the pandemic, which have driven up the cost of goods from computer chips to furniture. At the same time, many advanced economies have seen their growth forecasts revised downward, while inflation has remained stubbornly high, well above the targets set by central banks. These conditions have put the word stagflation back on the front pages and into the conversations of economists and investors worldwide. However, there is no consensus. Some economists argue that what we are experiencing is a series of temporary, short-lived shocks. They believe that as supply chains normalize and energy prices stabilize, inflation will cool down and growth will recover. Others are more pessimistic, warning that we could be facing a more structural problem, where persistent supply constraints and policy challenges lead to a prolonged period of stagflationary conditions. This ongoing debate is precisely why stagflation remains one of the hottest and most critical topics in economic discussions today. The threat of stagflation is not just a local issue. It has serious global implications. When major economic blocs like the United States or Europe enter a period of stagflation, the effects ripple across the entire world. Slower growth in these regions means reduced demand for goods and services from other countries, impacting global trade and harming export-oriented economies. To combat domestic inflation, central banks and advanced economies often raise interest rates, which leads to a stronger U.S. dollar. This creates a cascade of problems for developing countries. A strong dollar makes it more expensive for them to import essential goods like fuel and food, and it also increases the burden of their dollar-denominated debt. At the same time, nervous investors tend to pull their capital out of emerging markets and move it to safer assets, further weakening local currencies and destabilizing financial markets. This global contagion reinforces the reality that in our interconnected world, stagflation in one major economy can trigger a domino effect, leading to economic hardship and financial instability far beyond its borders. Looking ahead, what is the future outlook? Economists are considering several possible scenarios. In the most optimistic case, the recent stagflationary pressures are temporary, caused by short-term shocks that will eventually fade. For example, if energy prices come down and supply chains are fully repaired, inflation could fall back to normal levels, allowing economies to resume a path of stable growth. This would be the soft landing that policymakers are hoping for. However, there is also a more pessimistic scenario: a period of prolonged stagflation. This could happen if structural issues persist, such as chronically low productivity growth, geopolitical instability that keeps energy prices high, or a fundamental shift in global supply chains that makes goods permanently more expensive. In this scenario, we could be stuck in a low-growth, high-inflation environment for years. On a brighter note, long-term trends like the green energy transition, advancements in technology and artificial intelligence, and efforts to diversify supply chains could ultimately reduce stagflation risks. These innovations have the potential to boost productivity and make our economies more resilient to future shocks. The path forward remains uncertain, balancing cautious optimism with the reality of lingering risks. So, let's recap. Stagflation is that rare but dangerous combination of low economic growth and high inflation, a toxic mix that poses a severe challenge to governments, businesses, and households. Understanding its historical lessons from the 1970s and its relevance in today's world is crucial for anyone looking to make sense of the global economy. It's a reminder that economic stability is fragile and that the worst of both worlds is a real possibility. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think stagflation is a real risk today, or is it just a temporary scare? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Economy Unpacked Daily, and share it with friends. Your support helps us continue to unpack the complex world of money and make it accessible to everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.